Welcome to this Daily Meditations author interview. My name is Mark Longhurst. I'm the publications manager at the CAC, and every several months we speak with an author who has impacted the work of Richard Rohr's Daily Meditations. And today I am thrilled to be speaking with Kaira Lingo. Kaira is a Buddhist teacher, and the work of spirituality and social justice has been a deep passion for her throughout her life. And she teaches in the Engaged Buddhism tradition developed by Thich Nhat Hanh. And she was a nun at Thich Nhat Hanh's community for 15 years. She is the author of and co-author of a couple of books. We will be speaking today about her book, We Were Made for These Times, 10 Lessons for Moving Through Change, Loss, and Disruption. And I am so grateful and excited to be speaking with you, Kaira today. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be with you.
Well, I wanted to just start and ask a basic question, really, is why did you write this book, and how were you hoping that it would be helpful for people?
Yeah. I really asked myself the question, well, what do I know? And I know how to go through times of disruption and change and loss. And so I wanted to share my own experience of how to move through really difficult moments. I mean, what I describe in the book is the most difficult transition I've gone through in my life, which was moving from being a nun to disrobing. And I wanted to share what I relied on, what was supportive for me, what helped me and kept me steady during that really tumultuous period where I kind of felt like my identity was coming apart and I didn't know who I was or who I was supposed to be anymore. So I wanted to share so that other people in that situation could take something, maybe rely on some of that for their own journeys. Yeah.
One thing I loved about the book is the combination of personal experience, Buddhist wisdom, specific practices, and I also felt that it was applicable both to individuals and collective realities. And I just want to share this one experience. I was walking in the woods with my dog and listening to your Audible book, and it's just lovely to hear your voice reading it. And then it switches into practice, and all of a sudden you were guiding me in a practice, and I sat down in the middle of the trail, and it was like a wet leaves or something, and I just did the practice with it. So I just appreciated the authenticity and the wisdom and practice that you offered.
Oh, that's lovely. What a great image of you and your dog
Yeah.
meditating in the forest.
Well, and I also wanted to ask you about something that you often list in your bio, which is that you teach in the tradition of Engaged Buddhism developed by Thich Nhat Hanh. And then you also say that you take inspiration from your parents and your father's work in with Martin Luther King Jr. So I found that really inspiring, those two sentences together. So for folks who might not be familiar with Engaged Buddhism, what is it? And can you share anything about how your parents and the civil rights movement has inspired you as well?
Sure. So, Engaged Buddhism was a term that was popularized by Thich Nhat Hanh, a Vietnamese Zen master, and it really had existed for many, many generations. I think really all of Buddhism, when it's practiced deeply, is engaged. It means we aren't just doing our own individual practice to awaken as individuals, that whatever we practice has to be relevant and speak to the suffering in our world as well. So, since the time of the Buddha upended the caste system. That's Engaged Buddhism. The Buddha welcomed women into the order, which was a huge revolution at that time, to allow women to determine their own lives and how they wanted to live and not be under the control of men. That was engaged Buddhism. Um, and the way the Buddha was engaged with kings and rulers, giving them teachings on how to rule wisely and justly and compassionately and to address inequality. That was engaged Buddhism. And so then you have, fast forwarding to Thich Nhat Hanh, his students, we as his students call him Thai, which means teacher in Vietnamese. Thai would say, we're in the midst of war in Vietnam, whether it was the French occupying Vietnam or the war with the United States. And as monks and nuns, we can't just sit in our meditation halls. We have to bring our practice into the world. So he started a school of youth for social service, training thousands of young people, both monastic and lay, to be social workers in villages to help poor peasants, farmers improve their agricultural processes, to build schools so that children could go to school, to develop healthcare centers. So that was an example of engaged Buddhism, where we have to take our practice. And, these social workers had a day of mindfulness every week. One day out of every 7 days was to practice meditation, singing, walking meditation, eating a meal in mindfulness, having a time to share with each other, Dharma sharing, a kind of council practice where everyone was heard and everyone spoke from the heart. So built into their engagement in the world was this coming home to themselves, to take care of their breath, their emotions, their bodies, take care of the relationships between them so that they wouldn't burn out and they wouldn't have schisms of, breaking apart in the community. So, it was work like that led Dr. King to nominate Thai for the Nobel Peace Prize in 1967, just seeing the sincerity, the depth of his practice as a spiritual teacher, but also his sincere wish for peace and doing everything he could to bring about an end to the war. So that's a bit about engaged Buddhism. And, it continued in Thai's life in the West. When he built monasteries and started training people in the West, we would offer retreats for Congress people in the U.S. And Congress, there was a congressman that said, I practice walking meditation from my office to the voting hall. Before I vote, I really try to look deeply into the matter using the spiritual practice he learned from Thai. And we offer, the Plum Village tradition offers retreats for teachers, for medical professionals, for law enforcement professionals, business people. Many teachers have gone and taught in prisons. So this is another example of modern day Buddhist practice being brought into the world to address the real situations of people in the world. And then as far as my parents and my dad, so my dad is from Texas, a white Southerner, grew up privileged, middle class, upper middle class, where he really benefited from segregation as a young white man growing up in the 40s and 50s. And early on, he really began to question that system of racial hierarchy and I think he felt in his bones it was wrong, even though, everything around him was trying to convince him that it was right. And so he joined the Southern Christian Leadership Council, SCLC, with Dr. King and others, and was part of the movement to integrate swimming pools and beaches in St. Augustine. He was rented the room that allowed then at Monson Motor Lodge, that famous photo of the police officer flying into the pool with his baton. My dad was in that pool. He had rented the room, and then they had invited the other Black civil rights workers to integrate the pool. And he was, beaten up, integrating beaches with others, and went arrested, and his life was threatened. And he also was there on Bloody Sunday when they marched over the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And then when they received the injunction from the judge to lead that march 2 weeks later, he was the one who got the places for people to stay on that 5-day march. So he went ahead and found farmers willing to offer their land for everyone to put up tents on their journey. Hearing his stories of organizing white Alabamians in the white citizens, the Concerned White Citizens of Alabama was the name of the organization. They were supportive of integration, and many of them, lost their jobs and were harassed. But just to see in the example of my dad's life, someone who knew this just wasn't right, and that even if it meant, he was kind of disowned by his family for this work, but he was willing to sacrifice his own safety, his own well-being, because he knew that this really was, the only way to live, was challenging this evil. And he has said that without Dr. King, without his work in the civil rights movement, he couldn't have become fully human. That there was a humanizing role that played in his life. And then when he met my mom, who is a Black woman who lived on the west side of Chicago, they met in the mid-'60s, and they started dating. And when Dr. King was assassinated, that was sort of a real turning point for them, where they said, we're going to make our lives about continuing his legacy. And so they decided to get married and have a family. And so I often think, if it weren't for Dr. King, I don't know if I would be here. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And the role of Dr. King, both in impacting your father and your mother, and then also playing such a role in nominating Thai to be the Nobel Peace Prize, and the friendship that they had. It's really powerful to hear you share of really just engaged spirituality from from Buddhism and from Christianity.
Yeah.
And I can tell how passionate that integration of spirituality and social justice is for you. Thanks
Yes.
so much for sharing that, and for the way that you articulate that intersection. It's something that I know is important for Father Richard Rohr, and at the heart of the Center for Action and Contemplation.
Yes. Beautiful.
Well, let me ask a question about the book. We Were Made for These Times, 10 Lessons for Moving Through Change, Loss, and Disruption. You share lessons that will be helpful in developing a calm, steady presence as we navigate the winds of change, whatever we're facing. And one of the helpful lessons that you share is accepting what is. And you write that accepting reality, accepting what is, and then even welcoming reality as welcoming the present moment as a wonderful moment, can help us create and cultivate that sturdy presence of compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and you use Thich Nhat Hanh's meditation, breathing in, present moment. I'm probably going to get it wrong, but breathing out, wonderful moment.
Yeah.
And I'm just so moved by that meditation in particular. And I wanted to ask you, what does it mean to really accept what is, accept reality, and even the present moment as a wonderful moment, when so much in our lives and in our world is not wonderful at all.
So that's a very deep practice. Present moment, wonderful moment. Because exactly as you say, there is so much suffering in this world, and um, there's so much injustice, there's so much unnecessary pain that's being caused, right? And the depth of this teaching is that I was just reading this morning a Jewish rabbi saying in the Talmud, it says you have to bless both the good and the bad that comes to you. Maybe I could speak to it in terms of two dimensions, that there is the historical dimension in Buddhism where things are born, things die, things come, things go, um, things are not. But there's an ultimate dimension in Buddhism also, which is just as real, but it's less tangible, where things are never born and never die, and there's no coming and no going, and there's no here and no there. A bit like maybe Newtonian physics and quantum physics, right? Where we need Newtonian physics, we need the gravity and all these laws that help us, build bridges and move through the world and understand ourselves in space and time. But at the same time, there's another reality that's operating, which is beyond gravity, right? At the quantum level, things are doing things that just don't make sense to our, non-quantum level understanding. How is it that this, subatomic particle here can influence this subatomic particle, and they're moving at the same time in the same way, but they're, how is that possible? And so in the ultimate dimension, or, it's beyond the limitations of the historical dimension. So all the things that happen in our lives that we have joy over or we grieve over, those don't define us in the ultimate dimension, right? So that's one way to understand this teaching of present moment, wonderful moment, is that life is unfolding in ways we can't always understand when we're right in the thick of it. But if we zoom out and we see, this is because that is. That's something the Buddha said. This has come to be because of that condition or cause. And there's innumerable causes and conditions. We can't evaluate all of them for why one occurrence has come about. Some things are going to happen that cause suffering. Some things are going to bring us joy. Some things will happen in our lives that we want. Some things will happen that we don't want. And there's tremendous freedom that can come from learning to turn towards all of it with an open heart, rather than pushing away what we don't want and fighting what we don't think should happen. If we can work with it, it doesn't mean that we just lay down and let terrible things happen. We can take good care of ourselves. We can take good care of others in the midst of what is unwanted and unpleasant and painful. But we're not adding suffering to the pain that's unavoidable, right? There's this phrase, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Like there's a certain amount of pain that we're all going to have in our lives that's unavoidable. But whether or not we suffer on top of that pain is up to us. And this teaching, present moment, wonderful moment, helps us to say, if we can dwell in the present moment and just be with this now, not project ourselves into the future, but we get into so much suffering and anxiety and fear and worry when we leave the present moment and say, well, what if I feel this way tomorrow and 5 years from now, right? And then we can't bear it. If we leave the present moment, that's when it becomes unbearable, right? When we project all of our fear into what could happen, what if this, what if that. But if we can stay right with the present moment, and it doesn't mean sometimes the present moment is also unbearable. The pain can be unbearable. But if we can stay with what's just right here, as hard as that may be, and take care of this present moment, then the next moment is a continuation of this moment. So we can also take care of that moment. If we can just hold ourselves just as we are, whether we're struggling, whether we're afraid, but allowing that to be there, not fighting against it. A lot of the suffering shifts because we're not adding on to the difficulty that's already there. So, there's a grief group that studies my book, and all of the people in the group have lost, loved ones. And a woman was saying that she had lost her husband. They were, in their 30s, 40s. It was not expected at all. It was a very difficult loss. And she said, I really struggled with this present moment, wonderful moment. And I said, it can be present moment opening to the moment. It can be present moment allowing the moment. Present moment feeling the moment. Like there are ways to move into opening that you don't have to, if it's not appropriate for you to go towards wonderful, it can be just present moment, and it's the only moment. That's why it's wonderful. It's the only moment we have. We are not guaranteed any future moment. So as hard as it may be, or as unwanted as it may be, it's like, how do we bless this too? Because this is part of the life that we've been given, and the life that we, if we're going to live it, we have to decide to live it. So it's this invitation to see how much our attitude towards our conditions, right? The uncontrollable conditions of our life, how much our attitude has to do with how we experience these uncontrollable events. Because our attitude is under our control. It is part of our choice. The conditions are not, but how we respond to them are.
That is wonderful. And is it fair to say that when I'm doing that practice, present moment, allowing the moment, I love the variations that you provide. Eventually, we hope recognizing it's a wonderful moment just because it is a moment. I appreciate that. Is it fair to say that then I'm being invited as I keep practicing that into this bigger reality, this more ultimate dimension?
Yes, exactly. It's when we don't cling to our idea of how our lives should be, we enter this space that helps us see how connected we are to every other being, every other person. And this woman who was practicing with her husband, he was still alive. He was in great pain. She was able to, with this practice, as horrific of emotional pain that she was experiencing watching her husband pass, she was able to feel gratitude for the medical personnel who was caring for him, who was guiding her through this process, for, tapping into the other people in this planet who were going through similar things that she was going through. So there was this capacity to kind of expand and touch into this different dimension than just, you know, our own experience. And so, yes, when we look at our lives from this expanded place, we can touch into this other way of seeing reality, of experiencing reality.
I'd like to pivot a bit and ask you about our daily meditations theme. Every year we have a theme for the daily meditations that inspires our work throughout the weeks and the months, and we choose it before we launch it in January. And this year it's being salt and light, and we're taking some inspiration from Jesus's words in Matthew's gospel. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. And we're leaning into the possibility of being a presence of compassion, healing, and love, just as you've talked about, regardless of what's going on in our lives, of finding that sturdy presence. And so I wanted to ask what that means to you from your experience and tradition. What is being salt and light, or being transforming change, mean to you from your own lens?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with the Bodhisattva vow, which is the heart of uh, our lives in Mahayana Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, well, in other traditions as well of Buddhism. This, when I wanted to be a nun, it was with this understanding that, my mom, who lived her life in this very engaged spiritual way, but as a Christian, when I told her I wanted to be a nun, her one concern was, does this mean you're going to be hiding from the world? And I said, actually, it's the opposite, Mom. We take the Bodhisattva vow as when we go on this path of monastic life, where we vow to awaken not only ourselves, but to include all beings in our awakening, that we will give all of our energy and awareness so that every living being can awaken along with us, not that we do it on our own. And when she heard me say that, she was like, fine, I'm good with this decision. So this being salt, being light, sounds like a bodhisattva vow also too. You're going on the path yourself. You're being a light for others. You're committing to supporting all beings to move from the shore of suffering to the shore of freedom and peace and ease. And so there's when I hear you're the salt of the earth, this is very earthy also. It's very humble. It's very connected to the most vulnerable, the most meek, right? And so the sense of offering yourself in the service of others, that your path of awakening, that your spiritual path is not just about your own accomplishments, your own gains, but really it's about service. It's about being a kind of bridge or doorway yourself to others, to be able to access these teachings through you, even as you're walking the path with everyone else. And this beautiful teaching from the Bible, to whom much is given, much is required, is also for me this being salt, being light. Like any of us who have tasted fruit on the spiritual path, we have been given much. So much is required of us that we share and open the doors to others who also want this taste of freedom. And then the last thing I'll say is that you all know this, but our listeners might not, that Adam Bucko, my husband, Father Adam Bucko, and myself, one of the ways I see us together responding to this, being salt, being light, is uh, our vision to start a practice center, the beloved community for engaged spirituality, a place where people can come and practice and really strengthen and deepen the skills that are going to be needed for the incredible journey that the human species has in front of us for the next decades, if we make it as a species. But this time of polycrisis, this time of systems breaking down, how do we have a real refuge in ourselves, in all of the beauty of our spiritual traditions, a myriad of spiritual traditions, so that we can be salt, be light in the world, in the midst of breakdown, and hopefully building something new that is what can really allow us to survive and thrive.
Gosh, I'm so inspired by a lot of what you said. You've provided so many examples of being salt and light from the work of Engaged Buddhism and Thich Nhat Hanh and Martin Luther King Jr. and your family. But then to share a really practical example of how you're seeking to build a community of where people can practice spiritual practice, deepen in their spiritual path, so that they can share this vision of hope, peace, joy, a liberating vision with the world. It's not just for us, and connecting to that as the Bodhisattva path. I just that's really inspiring insight. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
I know we're almost out of time, Kaira Jewel, but I wanted to ask if would it be okay if you ended us with about just a couple of minutes of contemplative practice as a way of encouraging us to really be that salt and light that we've been talking about, as a way of encouraging us in our desire to be a steady presence in times of change, loss, and disruption.
Sure.
Great. Thanks so much.
hmm So we can feel our bodies and notice our posture and experience the flow of the in-breath and the flow of the out-breath. And taking the deepest breath you've taken all day. Deep inhale into the belly and a long full exhale. Let's do that one more time. Deep inhale, a long slow exhale. And just connecting now to your physical experience of your body in space, in time. So allowing the muscles of the face to soften, allowing the shoulders to soften, breathing into any places that might be holding tension in the body, and just inviting with the exhale a release of this tension. And gathering your awareness at the heart center. Breathing into the heart, breathing out from the heart. Inviting in this sense of purpose, this sense that you are here in this life for a very important reason. Perhaps saying to yourself with the inhale, I am the salt of the earth. And with the exhale, I am the light of the world. I am the salt. I am the light. Being the salt, being the light. And noticing what that evokes in you, what images or feelings or aspirations do you have for how you, in your unique life, will manifest the beauty and the power of infinite love, infinite wisdom, even in the smallest of ways. It all matters. So breathing in, being the salt, breathing out, being the light, letting yourself open to how that light wants to come through you, how that delicious flavor of salt wants to come through you. We know that salt is sort of irreplaceable in recipes. How are you irreplaceable in this world? How are you the light that others need in order to find their way? Giving gratitude for yourself being the salt, being the light, honoring yourself for whatever ways you have been already and will continue to be in the future. Amen. Ashe.
Amen, Ashe.